Which running backs can you count on in your lineup for week 10 of fantasy football, and who should stay on your bench? Stay tuned to find out, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button at the end so you don't miss any of our shows each and every week. So, running back is just becoming thinner by the week. Chris, we got several stars on bye, more players hurt. It's tough to find a good running back these days.
It is, and these are some of the guys that you can start with confidence this week, starting with James Robinson against the Green Bay Packers. This is almost as good as it gets for a running back. Packers giving up 100 yards on the ground, 4.5 yards per carry, also giving up over 6 catches per game. James Robinson is getting pretty much all the work there in Jacksonville. Top 5 running back this week for me, no question about it, especially like you said, with the buys, with the injuries. So roll him out with confidence this week.
Yeah, for a while, it looked like he was slipping a little bit. I mean, he had become almost a fancy RB1 and then a down period. But now that Jacksonville offense, believe it or not, without Minshew, seems like it's back on track. So, I mean, he's a top 10 back, believe it or not. It's James Robinson. I'm going to go with a guy who I also have top 10 this week. I know last week was very disappointing, but your boy out of Washington, Antonio Gibson, he's going to make up for it. Just forget last week, right? That was just bad game script. It just, everything kind of fell out of his favor. They fell behind early. They were down, I think, 23 at halftime. Of course, the Kyle Allen unfortunate injury. So it just didn't work out. But you know what? This week, going against the Detroit Lions defense, and you know what? That Lions defense, they're giving up the most points, fantasy points, against opposing running backs above their average. Okay, so we talk about the worst run defenses. Technically, in fantasy standards right now, Detroit is right now the worst. Okay, so I don't think they'll fall behind. There's worry about Stafford, and of course, Galladay's out. That Detroit offense, I don't think is going to jump up big on them either. So I think Gibson will get it going, and he should have an easier time this week for sure.
Yeah, you got to like any running back going against Detroit. Another running back that I really like in week 10 is Miles Sanders. He's back practicing. Looks like he should be back from his injury against the New York Giants. They have been really bad against running backs lately. They've just been really bad, period, lately. I expect him to get a ton of run, a ton of work in this game, lots of upside. So fire up Miles Sanders if you got him. If you've been holding on to him through the injury, through the bye, now's the time. Roll him out there.
Yeah, and it's funny. I bet you will get some questions this Sunday when we do Endgame Live about Miles Sanders. Should we start him? Should you trust him? Absolutely. And a guy we haven't mentioned, but Nick Chubb coming back. Just because they've been off for a couple of weeks, it doesn't matter. These are RB1s. You get them in your lineup as long as they're playing, even if it's not 100% or 100% snap count. And Sanders can break a big play at any time. So he's pretty much a must start in all formats. And then I know I mentioned Nick Chubb. What about Kareem Hunt? If Chubb is back, does that ding Hunt's value? No, we've seen the opposite. Hunt is actually more effective. He's one of those running backs that's more effective when he's not in the main role. As a change of pace, he was doing great. He was a weekly RB2 and had some down weeks, but honestly, maybe having less of the load will do him better. But also, let's not forget, facing the Houston Texans defense, that's a pretty easy matchup. We already talked about this with guys like Robinson last week. Saw how he did. So don't even sweat, whether you should start Hunt or not. He's still in that RB2 range. You got to keep him in your lineup.
Yeah, we saw early in the season when both of these guys were healthy, Hunt still had plenty of value. So, I mean, obviously you're not going to get, that every down guy you got while Chubb was out. But in this matchup, it probably doesn't matter. Chubb and Hunt are both going to feast this week. And then my final must start, and this might seem obvious, and that's Aaron Jones. But after 2 weeks, missing 2 weeks with an injury, and then not really doing a ton against the Niners, I could definitely see people starting to get nervous about Aaron Jones. Don't worry, it's Jacksonville. We talked about Detroit being a great matchup. We talked about the Packers being a great matchup. Well, Jacksonville is also a great matchup, giving up 100 yards per game, over 6 catches per game. I expect Aaron Jones to have a monster game. I know last week it was disappointing. Aaron Rodgers threw 3 touchdowns from the 1-yard line. Aaron Jones didn't even get a chance. That will change this week. Look for him to get back into the end zone as well. Monster week incoming for Aaron Jones.
Yeah, he's one of those few running backs that falls into pretty much must start pretty much every week, I would say. But I know there's been some concern, obviously, off a couple of weeks, and and whatnot. But yeah, you don't worry about it. You start Jones for sure. And then my last pick is a guy we haven't talked about, honestly, I don't think all year in start sit, because there was not a question. You don't had a reason to start him, but now you do. And I did mention him in the waiver wire video, and that is Duke Johnson. So David Johnson looks like he'll be out due to concussion. He was in line for a big game last week, but just didn't happen because he missed most of the game. Well, Duke Johnson showed up pretty well. He got a touchdown, 70-something total yards. And you know what? He can do even better in a full game against his former team, the Cleveland Browns. I'm not going to talk about revenge game, but you know what? If he's getting all the touches in that backfield, and Houston has shown they don't use a committee approach, really. I mean, Duke had barely been getting any touches. So now that he is, I feel like he's a pretty strong RB2, especially with so many other guys out this week.
Yep, totally agree. I've never been big on Duke Johnson as an every down player like a lot of people, but he's good enough, no doubt about that. And the matchup, the Browns aren't a defense to be scared of. So I'm expecting a very solid, very good game from Duke Johnson this week.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about some guys we don't feel so good about. And this list actually includes some names, a guy that I mentioned last week as a must start, and now we're reversing course. So Chris, who's your first must sit for week 10?
Yeah, it's Damien Harris, and he's dealing with a chest injury. So if he sits, then consider this my warning to not play Rex Burkhead. Going against the Denver Broncos, tough run defense, much worse against the pass. You can beat them through the air. And the thing is, last week, we both were really high on Damien Harris going against the Jets. Why not? But there was a couple things. Number one, Rex Burkhead got a lot of run even before Damien Harris's chest injury. Number two, Cam Newton. He vultures a lot of the goal line work. They run sneaks with Cam Newton. I think there was that one drive where he ran it like 3 times inside of the 2, Cam Newton, before he finally got in towards the end of the game there. So that's not good for a guy who basically just carries the ball, right? He doesn't catch passes. So I want no part of Damien Harris, and to a lesser extent, Rex Burkhead if Damien Harris is out.
Yeah, and you've been saying all those things basically all year about Damien Harris. I mean, this is a pretty limited ceiling because of all those things. No pass catching, and I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised he's a Patriots running back. He was still efficient, honestly, against the Jets. Just somehow the Jets got ahead, and they were ahead up until the very end of the game where they find a way to blow it. So I think he could have, but then I really don't know if Damien Harris will ever get more than 20 carries in a game because it's Bill Belichick. So yeah, against Denver's run defense kind of sneaky good. So my first must sit is a guy I'm honestly ready to give up on for this season, but for this week for sure, Melvin Gordon. You might look at the fact that playing the Raiders, and the Raiders are kind of up there as far as rushing allowed this year. This is kind of a tale of two halves, even though technically this is like the halfway point of the season. If you look at the first half of the games that have played so far, in the first 4 games, the Raiders were one of the worst run defenses in the league. They piled up a ton of yardage against, and the last 4 weeks, it's been totally different. They've actually been one of the better run stop units. So I don't know if it's just a shift in philosophy. They're just, maybe a schedule change. I don't know, softer opponents, but whatever the case is, the Raiders aren't going to be a cream puff. And Gordon, you see that he's not even the lead back anymore. Phillip Lindsay, they seem to like a little bit better. Gordon's getting a little bit more pass catching work, but I mean, he's not a must start at all. And against what turns out to be a tough matchup, and he's been terrible lately, I have no faith in him.
Yeah, you're right. And the big concern here to me is Phillip Lindsay. He is starting, or at least last week, to get a little bit more touches than Melvin Gordon. And he's honestly looked better than Melvin Gordon when he does have the ball. So definitely panic time for anybody who has Melvin Gordon. And then my last must sit, and again, I have to do a little bit of an injury caveat here, and that's Darrell Henderson, who did injure his thigh before the team's bye. So this is something to monitor. But if he's out, just consider this a warning about Malcolm Brown or Cam Akers as well, because you're going against Seattle. We've talked about it many times. It's easy to look at Seattle, say terrible defense, but they're terrible against the pass. They're pretty good against the run. And, if that's not enough, Damon Harrison, one of the best run-stopping tackles in the NFL, if not the best. Pete Carroll said he should be back this week. So their run defense is only going to get better. The Rams are going to have to beat this team through the air. We saw it with Buffalo last week. We've seen it with every team. You beat the Seahawks by throwing against them. I just don't think the Rams running attack is going to do anything this week. So definitely bench Darrell Henderson if you have him and if he plays. But if he doesn't, don't start any Rams running back.
Yeah, actually, you know, honestly, I'm selfishly hoping that Henderson doesn't play at all because that thigh injury, because I really just want to see Cam Akers, just a full game of Cam Akers, right? Just please at some point. So my last must sit is a guy we could spend hours talking about, but let's just keep it short and sweet. Jonathan Taylor, you got him. You really want him to be a thing. He's not a thing. And you know what? Even besides what's happened the last couple of weeks, it's just we have to admit this is now a full-blown three-man committee because Jordan Wilkins has been pretty efficient with his touches. Naheem Hines gets the pass catching work. It's just none of these guys are really going to be fantasy relevant on a weekly basis. You just can't trust them. And you know what? When Taylor fumbles and then gets pulled, that's just going to hurt his confidence. To me, with Taylor, it's a confidence thing, and I don't see him getting it back soon enough. I can't trust him. The ceiling is just too low. So keep him on your bench.
Yeah, it's hard to trust any of these Colts running backs because, you know, last week it was Taylor and then he fumbled and then they didn't give him the ball anymore. So you never know who it's going to be. And I agree in this matchup, just keep him on the bench, not worth the risk.
No, and that's the thing. Got to make smart decisions, guys. That's why we're here to help you. Who do you have questions about? Hit us up. If you have a comment, leave it right here about any running backs. Or as I mentioned on Sunday mornings, 2 hours before kickoff, we're always live on the air in this very channel. Hit subscribe, hit that little notification bell, and you won't miss it. But we're there to answer all your start sit questions with the latest updates, help you win. All right. Good luck in week 10, and thanks for watching.